welcome to another edition of the Litigation Psychology Podcast, brought to you by Courtroom Sciences. I am Dr. Bill Kanasky. How's it going? Yeah, 2024. And we're going to do a med-mal series, a series of podcasts really focusing on healthcare litigation, med-mal litigation. Got some great guests, some panelists coming on, so I'll be good. And there's a lot to talk about, and I really wanted to isolate some of this stuff because I think particularly with witness testimony, you got a wide array of witnesses when you're in the healthcare arena. You've got your cardiothoracic and brain surgeons, right, all the way down to the LPN nurse, right? Allied healthcare professionals. These are very, very different people. When they sit for deposition, those depositions are going to be very important. And I think some of the things that they have in common is, for the most part, these are very caring people. They got into a helping profession, and they care about their patients. The problem is when you take somebody that's in a helping profession and you put them in a litigation legal environment, it's very difficult for them to communicate effectively because their work communication skills often get in the way of effective testimony. So what I want to focus on today is the nurses. I want to talk about nurses sitting for deposition. And I want to really focus today on that that LPN, okay, that nursing assistant. Okay, and we'll kind of, with these other podcasts, we'll kind of work our way up the chain. These, for lack of a better term, these kind of, lower level nurses oftentimes get the post. They have a very, very important role in the healthcare system. They are they're assisting higher level nurses. They're assisting MSNs. They're assisting nurse practitioners who have much higher levels of training. And oftentimes these particular types of nurses, the LPNs, they're doing a lot of dirty work. They're doing a lot of the work that you and I could not do. And oftentimes, in my experience, but I've worked with thousands of these folks at this point over a 20-year period. And a couple things in common that they have. Number one, they often feel unappreciated because they're doing all the dirty work. They're doing all the work no one else wants to do. They feel like they're not compensated very well. Okay. And when they come into the deposition environment, they're oftentimes very scared, very fearful, sometimes think that they're going to lose their job. Sometimes fearing that if they don't do well at their deposition, something bad's they're going to get punished at work, or there's going to be a reputational issue. Depositions are not easy, but particularly for these folks who, again, play this like huge, important, key role in our healthcare system. Doing jobs none of us are probably capable of doing. When many of you know my mom passed on Memorial Day last year. And then a couple years before that, her mom, my grandmother, who was my best friend in the world, passed. And interacting with these types of nurses, I mean, they spend the most time with these patients. They do, they're putting people on bedpans. They're cleaning up afterwards, right? These are really, really difficult jobs. and they're so important jobs. And to treat patients, in tough situations with dignity, hats off to these folks. But the problem we have is that when there's a med mal lawsuit, oftentimes they're going to get deposed. And so, how do you deal with one of these types of nurses? So attorneys, you're obviously going to meet with them. I find that they come in with a lot of reluctance. Again, they're scared. I think there's a lot of finger pointing um, types of pressures with these nurses because they're on the you know lower end of the decision making chain. And there are a lot of fight or flight, decision making patterns with these nurses. And so what do you do? Well, a couple of suggestions. Number one, I think it's important. This is with any nurse, but particularly these, is you want to meet with them as soon as humanly possible. Once the lawsuit's filed, once word spreads, once they figure out they're going to have to be deposed, it's going to be stressful. And the sooner that you can talk to these folks, many of them have never been deposed before. Dr. Steve Wood and I wrote that paper on the 13 cognitive distortions that, how your mind messes with you. These witnesses will have a lot of those. They will catastrophize. They will engage in a lot of illogical thinking, out of fear. They're scared. And so getting to them as early as possible, talking to them, getting their side of the story, but also seeing, how they're doing, what their thought patterns are. I think that's one thing where attorneys struggle. Defense attorneys, you really struggle with this, is that you talk to your witnesses about the lawsuit, about the events, about the medical records, and you don't spend enough time talking to these people as human beings. You really don't. You really, really don't. And I know this for a fact because when I come in on these cases during one of the breaks, oftentimes a nurse pulls me aside and says, you're the first person that's asked me, how am I feeling? How am I doing? How am I sleeping? Am I skipping meals because I'm so goddamn nervous? Right? Um, these are important issues that can drastically impact the quality of the testimony because number one, listen, half of this country has mental health issues, whether diagnosed or undiagnosed, okay? And these nurses will be in the you have to and yes, it's going to be an armchair assessment by the attorney, but you have to ask them how they're doing because probably no one has. And if they're scared, if they're fearful, number one, you asking about that is going to make them feel a hell of a lot better. Okay. You're going to find things otherwise you wouldn't have found just because you asked. Okay. Number two, showing that you care. Okay. That you care about them. See, defense counsel, if you come in like caring about the lawsuit and caring about defending your client, yeah, that's really important. But you got to care about the witness. You got to care about the human being, the person going through this. Okay. This is going to build trust. Okay. This is going to build trust. They're going to open up to you. They're going to be more honest with you versus jumping into the page 15 of the medical record. Right. Lack of trust between witnesses and attorneys is very, very common. Because healthcare professionals, by the way, most people, right, they don't trust attorneys, they don't like attorneys, they don't like anything legal. Anything legal is stressful. And so they're already nervous going. It's kind of like going to the dentist. Okay. Nobody goes to the dentist with a smile. Nobody. And nobody goes to a meeting with the hospital attorney with a smile either. There's a lot of fear involved. So addressing these issues early, talking to them as human beings, really checking on them, how they are doing. Okay, very, very important, how they're doing emotionally. Okay, some of these witnesses will come in, again, they'll be scared to death. They'll be scared to death. And you can address some of those issues. Lots of times it's illogical thinking, right? I'm losing my job. I'm losing my nursing certification or license. No, no, you're not. Happens all the time. Or they're on the other end. They are epically pissed off, right? And they come in hot. They come in hot, running in the red. I'm running in the red. What movie? What movie? Pulp Fiction. Vincent Vega, John Travolta. Yeah, they're running in the red. They're pissed. Well, you need to ask about that stuff. So the first question I ask every nurse, actually every witness, but particularly for these nurses, I'm just going to tell you what I do. And you're more than welcome to copy. Is I tell them, I said, hey, listen, every nurse I work with comes into this process with some type of emotional reaction. I go, some people come in, they're scared to death. They can't sleep, they can't eat, they're worried. Other nurses come in and boy, they're mad. They're mad. They're upset. They're angry. And then some people come in and they just don't give a shit whatsoever. They're completely indifferent. And I say, which category of the three do you fit into? I start every single witness training like that with every witness, but particularly nurses and these lower level nurses. And every single time they immediately open up, tell me which category they're in and why. And it's very therapeutic to them. Okay. So defense counsel, all right, take that. It could be 15 minutes early on. Okay. To ask that very question. Number one, right? Another issue I see with these types of witnesses specifically relative to your high level nurses, your physicians, okay, your specialty surgeons, okay, an issue that pops up here is so this is the second thing that you're going to ask them. Very, very, very important. You're going to ask them, is there anything else going on in your life that is causing you stress right now that may impact your ability to prepare for this deposition? I asked that question, holy shit, you'd be amazed at the stuff that comes out that otherwise you would have never known about that can torpedo this witness's deposition. Things like, my husband just lost his job, or we're going through a bankruptcy, or I've gotten this one a lot. I have a sick family member. I have a family member that has cancer. It's really dragging me down. Or related to that, I have a sick family member, usually a parent, that I'm helping. I'm a caregiver. When I'm not working at the hospital, I'm home taking care of my mom or my dad. They're elderly. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Any of you been down that road? Yeah, not easy. It will suck the life out of you. Suck the energy out of you, wear you down. Okay. Well, how do you know if they have that? Well, if you don't ask, you're not going to know. Okay. Maybe I've worked with nurses that they're currently going through a divorce. That's nasty. Okay. I've had nurses that have children with autism, other developmental problems, very, very stressful, educational issues, getting in trouble at school, drug use. Hey, listen, life sucks. Life is hard, right? Who came up with it, right? Like life's a bitch and then you die, right? There's a reason There's a reason these phrases have been around for a long time. It's not easy, folks. And you have to figure out what's going on with your witnesses. So you have to ask these questions, figure out what else is going on in their lives. Now, once you figure all that out and you know what you're dealing with, okay, kind of, again, the next question, remember, so first you have to assess, and then you have to figure, okay, how can I prevent this from getting worse? So if you find something, kind of the third issue is, what are you doing to help this situation? Okay. Oh, back to another thing. Many of these nurses are not the healthiest people on the planet. They may be struggling with diabetes or high blood pressure, some kind of, chronic illness, pain. It's another thing you got to ask about, right? So then once you figure it out, so we're really talking about witness assessment here and why it's so important with these nurses, is you have to next then go, okay, what are you doing to address this problem? Are you going to the doctor? Are you going to physical therapy? Are you going to a therapist, a counselor? What are you doing? Are you exercising? Are you eating right? Okay. Now, at this point in the podcast, every defense attorney out there is like, I didn't sign up for this. I'm an attorney. Okay. And I know that. But the issue is, and the issue why I'm the busiest guy on the planet and why I do this so often is because these are real issues. Attorneys, I know you can't hire me on every case, and I don't want you to. I don't expect you to. But on many of these cases, you can make a huge difference as the attorney by learning how to ask these important questions of your witnesses, showing some empathy, and at least nudging them to take some action to get on the right track. Is it a self-help intervention? Is it going to see a professional? Okay. So everything I just talked about, that could take 15 to 30 minutes. It's crucial that you have answers to those questions to figure out what you're dealing with. Because if you do it the old-fashioned way and you just jump right into the case, you haven't addressed any of those things. When that person gets deposed and starts getting pushed by a really competent or aggressive plaintiff attorney, all this bad stuff's gonna come out. And it's going to affect their mood, it's going to affect their emotional status, it's going to affect their answers. They're going to wear down faster. Okay. So we can solve a lot of problems by assessing appropriately. But in particular, these types of nurses tend to have issues. Okay. They tend to have other things going on. That's my experience. That is just my experience. Okay. Don't shoot the messenger. So knowing that, once you get that information, you know what you're dealing with. Now you're going to jump into the case, right? So these lower level nurses may not have a ton of charting responsibilities, like say your higher, your RNs, your BSNs, your MSNs, your nurse practitioners. However, they have huge responsibilities. Okay. And so then you have to talk about the case. And you want to gauge, you want to gauge their memory. What do they really remember, right? You want to ask them about their job duties and responsibilities and kind of get a sense for what their role is. Okay. Now, another important question here. This is really important. And you have to remind them of attorney-client privilege. Okay, so now you've done this assessment. Okay. By the way, that's going to help them trust you more and open up to you more. And you need that when you start talking about the case, because witnesses will lie to you. And you're like, I'm the attorney. They're not going to lie to me. Yes, they will. Because they're scared and they're defensive. Do this good assessment, 15 to 30 minutes we're talking about. They will trust you and open up to you. And now you have to say, all right, We have attorney-client privilege here. This is completely confidential and protected. Tell me about your job. What do you like? What do you don't like? Are there issues you have? Do you have an axe to grind at work? Trust me, these nurses always do. Okay. What other nurses do you not get along with and you think don't do their jobs well? What's wrong with the system? What do you not like about the hospital or the nursing home or whatever? Get them to dump stuff on you. Let them vent. Let them vent. Because if you don't, they're going to vent to the plaintiff attorney. Hi, plaintiff attorneys. I know you're out there. By the way, as an aside, I try to be balanced here. Plaintiff attorneys, you need to do the same thing with your witnesses because it's stressful for them too. So everything I just said, plaintiff attorneys, you can do all that with your witness too, and that's important. Okay, not all plaintiffs are bad people. Plaintiffs have emotions, right? They're going through all this stuff too, legitimately. And so plaintiff attorneys, you need to assess your witnesses better too. There, see? Balanced here on the Litigation Psychology Podcast. So, you need to get these people to vent. What are the thorns in their sides at work? Very, very important. Okay, because those are going to come out in the depth, I'm telling you. And you want to get a hold of those and figure out what's going on, okay, before you start talking about their testimony. All right. Ask them about, have you been in trouble before? Have you been disciplined, right? Right? If you have a nurse that's been disciplined before, probably has a chip on her shoulder or his shoulder, you better find that chip, that thorn in their side. Because that's going to tell you a lot. That's going to tell you a lot. All right. But it's all about trust. They're not going to tell you this stuff if they don't trust you. They're not going to open up if they don't trust you. If they don't think you give a shit about them and you're just the hospital attorney, it's not going to work. Okay. And again, I know we're talking about nurses and med mal as part of our med mal series. But folks, if you're listening and you don't do med mal work, you do product liability or you do transportation, it's the same shit. You do the same thing with your truck driver. Okay. Same thing with your company employees on the product liability case. It's the same thing. Then, once you get, kind of more into the case, talk to them about their memory of their events. Okay. Talk to them about the importance of not pointing fingers. That a lot of finger pointing, the lower you go, it just, finger pointing can happen at any level, but at this particular level, I see a lot of finger pointing because they're scared. And they don't want to get in trouble. And kind of like, remember, as a parent or when you were a child and you get busted doing something, Johnny did it. That's what we do, right? Who dented the car? Johnny did it. My sister and I are growing up. My mom would come home. Who broke the vase? Nikki did it. I blame my sister. And she blamed me. That's a natural reaction that people do when there's blame to go around. And then a lawsuit, that's pretty significant blame. So you gotta get to the bottom of all this and then really, again, get their commitment, right? After you go through this case and stuff like that. Once you're going to end this you got to get their commitment to work with you going forward and say, okay, listen, all right, you've done your assessment, you've talked about their job, you figured out kind of where are those thorns, what's the chip on the shoulder, okay? You talked about the case, see what their memory is, see if they want to blame anybody. Okay. Now you're gonna have to do more work with them to prepare them for deposition. Maybe I'm involved, maybe I'm not. Doesn't really matter. But the key is on this initial meeting, right? You've got to walk out of there with their commitment to you and the process. And you need to say, listen, everything's going to be okay. You've addressed their illogical thoughts. They're not going to prison. They're not losing their job, things like that, right? They're not getting their car or their house repossessed. I've heard all these things, by the way. It's going to be okay. Okay. And I care about you. I care about you as a person. Yes, I care about your testimony. I care about this case. I want to win this case, or I want to get this case resolved fairly. But right next to that, simultaneously, I care about you as a human being. And I don't want you losing sleep over this. I don't want you stressing over this. And by the way, here's my card. If you're having issues, call me. Okay. They need to know you care and get their commitment to meeting with you going forward. Now, going forward, you're probably going to get more case specific, right? Getting into the medical record, the timeline of events, who else is saying what, okay? And you're going to get in the weeds about the case on your subsequent sessions. But how you handle the first one, right? This first session that you have with the LPN, the nursing assistant, whoever, again, kind of like that basic level of nursing. How you start that relationship is going to be crucial to how they perform at the deposition. Okay? How you start that. And I've seen some attorneys handle this really, really well. Okay? I've seen others skip steps 1 through 5 and jump right into the medical record. And then what you do is you scare the living shit out of your witness, or even worse, you piss them off. You piss them off because they don't think you care. If you want to get the most out of these witnesses, it's really important that you connect with them. All right, on all those things that we talked about. So, all right, in our subsequent podcasts on this, we'll go over, you know, how to deal with, regular, kind of more your mid-level nurses. We'll talk about nurse practitioners and physician assistants. There's some challenges there with nurse practitioners and physician assistants. They're dangerous. They know enough to be dangerous, but they're not physicians. And so, those folks they got to know when to punt the ball and say, I'm not a physician. You're going to have to ask a physician. The problem is they're like 2 inches away from being a physician. And they get a lot of key questions, and you have to work with them to determine what they should really be answering versus what they should be punting to a physician. That's always interesting. And then in other episodes, we'll get into different types of physicians, right? I mean, working with a cardiothoracic surgeon versus a radiologist is very, very different. Very different. Working with a cardiologist versus a pathologist, oh, very, very different, right? And then surgeons versus non-surgeon physicians. There's a big difference there in personality styles and challenges, right? Got a lot of pros and cons there. So we'll talk about that. But I thought starting here was would be something interesting. Give you guys some tools on how to talk to these folks, because you're going to need them. You're going to need them. You're going to need them to perform well at deposition, and that's going to have a big impact on the case. I think the last thing that you want, and by the way, I get a lot of phone calls. Ugh, it's the worst phone call, because the phone calls typically, I have this really bad med mal case. Mediation failed, settlement failed. Looks like we're going to trial. And I've got these 2 or 3 nursing, they're LPNs, they're lower level nurses, and boy, their depth stunk. And now they're really angry because the deposition process was so bad. They felt like they weren't prepared. They felt like they were being attacked. They feel like they're being blamed for all this. And then I'm walking into a hornet's nest. That's not the way to do this. Unfortunately, I get that call all too frequently because clients, not all of them, but a lot of them, don't see the value in prevention. We can prevent all this. So some of the things I just told you in this podcast episode, Defense Counsel, you can prevent a lot of messes if you do what I say. You can prevent a lot of headaches going forward. Sometimes, particularly on a higher exposure case, I can come in, I can help you with this. I can help you. And as a team, right? Because the other thing that's going to happen, Defense Counsel, is once you get in those subsequent meetings, you're going to find some issues that are going to trigger these witnesses. And are you going to be able to help them control their emotions? Maybe. I know I can. That's what I do. Well, I think this was a good episode. And 2024, I want everybody to have a fantastic year. What I've learned is that no year is going to be perfect. You're going to have your hiccups during the year, folks. But you gotta heard something good today. Yeah, it's not going to get easier. You've got to learn how to handle hard better. Let me say that again. It's not getting any easier. There is no easy street. Okay? It's going to be hard. Learn how to handle hard better. That is going to require some self-reflection, some self-growth, and some work on your part. All right. Litigation Psychology Podcast, Bill Kanasky. We will see you next time.